Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Zeller, and I'm a program manager in the MCW Office of Community Engagement. Welcome to our second installment of our new monthly series, CE Spotlight. Please note that this session is being recorded. I'd like to begin with a statement from the Office of Community Engagement. We wish to acknowledge the Indigenous people who are past and present stewards of the land on which we pursue our just cause of a healthy community for everyone. To our audience members, please be sure you are muted throughout the presentation. We encourage everyone to use the chat bar freely to share comments or post questions for our guest. We will be monitoring your questions throughout the session, so feel free to submit any as they come to you. And we are setting aside a few minutes at the end for our guests to address them. We also hope that you will join us for future Spotlight presentations, which will take place the second or third Wednesday of each month. Please look for information about upcoming guests on our CE website. You can find our series webpage by Googling MCW CE Spotlight. We are so excited about our new monthly series, which will feature community partners and the important work they are doing for and with the community. We highlight their goals, motivations, and accomplishments, and the ways they have partnered with people and programs at MCW. Today, we are deeply honored to have Mr. Otis Winstead Jr. as our CE Spotlight guest. At this time, I would like to introduce our Senior Associate Dean for Community Engagement, Dr. Stacey Young, who will say a few words about Otis's important work for the community and his partnership with MCW. Dr. Young?
Thank you, Christine. Mr. Otis Winstead Jr. has been an important partner of MCW for over 10 years with collaborative work focused on veterans' health issues. He is the Executive Director of Dry Hooch of America, a veteran-led social service agency. Otis has worked on multiple research projects in collaboration with MCW to improve veteran reintegration into civilian life and recovery from trauma and substance abuse. Otis was instrumental in organizing the African-American Veterans Memorial Wall at the Milwaukee War Memorial Building. The effort was decades in the making, and Otis catalyzed the work and aspirations of many organizations, including the Milwaukee NAACP, the Wisconsin Black Historical Society, and the National Association for Black Veterans to make this memorial a reality. More recently, Otis assisted MCW in the earliest days of the pandemic by helping to manage the logistics of mask distribution to the community as part of the Creative Health Collective, focused on community-generated, equitable response strategies to COVID-19, and was facilitated by Dr. Zeno Franco and the City and County of Milwaukee. This effort was recognized earlier this year by the MCW President's Community Engagement Award. Otis and his fellow nominees, Wade Fernandez, Tu Fong Lee, and Cecilia Garcia, won the award in the category of community partners for the exceptional work they had done and the positive impact they had on their respective communities. These community health workers became the eyes and ears of the city's response to COVID-19 in communities of color, offering critical insights about how and where to direct services during the early days of the pandemic. The impact of this frontline work included delivery of hundreds of thousands of masks to communities of color in collaboration with Mask Up MKE. Tens of thousands of pounds of food relief and household essentials such as diapers were also distributed. The team also provided referrals for rent, housing, and healthcare assistance. Mr. Winstead, thank you for your dedication, your hard work, and support you have given to improving the health and lives of the veterans and community members you serve. You are a valued partner of MCW, and we are honored to have you as our guest today. At this time, I'd like to introduce today's facilitator, Dr. Zeno Franco, Associate Professor in the Department of Family and Community Medicine. Dr. Franco has led multiple community academic partnerships over the last 10 years, focused largely on veteran and Latino mental health. He has led the Dry Hooch Partnership for Veteran Health, forming relationships with Dry Hooch and creating community strategies to engage veterans. Dr. Franco currently serves as the site co-PI of the All of Us Research Program, a large-scale precision medicine effort funded by the National Institutes of Health. Many of Dr. Franco's efforts focus on using technology to improve accessibility of care, including mobile mental health applications, institution-level digital repository strategies that facilitate community access to health-related information, and implementing database-driven systems to monitor and optimize the community engagement portfolio of the Medical College of Wisconsin. Zeno, I pass the mic on to you.
Thanks so much, Stacey. Great to see everyone, and thank you for being with us today, Otis. How's it going?
It's going great. Things going pretty good. I did want to just mention that, and this is really important. Ms. Stacey, thank you for the introduction, great introduction. And I want to thank the Medical College team for, this humble honor of being here. But, when we made the introduction about the participants in that mural, we didn't mention SDC, which was, they were a big part of it. Also, CVI played a big part of it, along with and I have to mention these guys because, I organized it, but guys like James Lindsay, who actually did the formatting of the actual mural itself, guys like Claiborne Benson, who is the director of the Black Historical Society, actually he was the curator of the whole piece, right? And Calvin, who works also for Advents, so there were a number of partners that were involved in it. And I just want to recognize those guys.
Otis, I think that's great. So I think one of the most important things with this is recognizing the importance of partnership, right? That it's hard to get anything done alone. I think when I was in the room during the ceremony around the unveiling of the African-American Veterans Memorial, it was palpable for me how many decades people had been working on this and not getting it quite to come to fruition. And I really appreciate that you're trying to recognize and honor all of those agencies and individuals who had been trying to carry that torch forward for a very long time. It was an amazing thing, actually, to see the unveiling of that wall and to be there, kind of as a guest. I'm actually wearing a pin from that day that the War Memorial gave me because it was such an important moment. But while you're recognizing all those partners, I think one of the key things from my perspective, Otis, is sometimes it takes somebody to catalyze all that energy and enthusiasm that hasn't quite gotten across the line. And I think that's what you brought to that discussion. And so while I think it's great to recognize that historical work and effort from all those different agencies, one of the things that I've appreciated the most about you is you're pretty no nonsense and you get things done. And so I think, in just a few months, what had been a stalled conversation kind of got restarted under your watch, and you got that wall done. Can you talk just for a moment about some of the images that are on the wall? I can see them. I can see a reproduction of the wall right behind you.
Yeah. So, I don't know that people realize that Christopher Ackes was the first soldier that actually died in the Revolutionary War, who happened to be an African American, right? And this picture sits in the center of the whole mural. Okay. So that's profound and that's important. When we talk about that, me and Dave, the executive director down there at the War Memorial, when we first sat down and talked about it, what was really important about it is that some of the younger generations coming through there, all those years, they would bring school kids through there, and there were no people of color to reflect themselves, in terms of maybe wanting to go into service. And even for him, that was important. So we've come a long way. But yeah,
you're saying at the War Memorial building by the lake, there was no reflection of veterans or military servicemen of color and women of color in that building
for over 60 years.
Right.
There was none. Right. And that was something that's needed to happen. Right. Yeah. But to your question about the mural itself, it was important that African-American veterans, men and women from Wisconsin, be on that mural. So what you're saying, there are a lot of all folks from the state of Wisconsin. It was
something.
Yeah.
It was an amazing day, actually. And so I think, one of the things for me too is I feel like I know a lot about U.S. military veterans and veteran culture and all these things that we work on together. But I had no idea that there was a Buffalo soldier buried at the Milwaukee VA cemetery until we got down deep into this discussion. So just some really interesting historical pieces around the level of service African Americans have provided to the U.S. military. So thank you for all of that work, Otis. I'm going to transition just a little bit and ask if you could just tell us a little bit about sort of your background, how you got to where you are, how you started working for Dry Hooch a few years ago.
Yeah, so originally I'm from a place called Trafford, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Pittsburgh, about 25 miles outside of Pittsburgh, right? Very rural area. Rural in the sense that for me, my father, who was from North Carolina, my mother, who was from Alabama, right? And I don't know why he took us there. I think it was probably good. Geographically, there were only 12 Blacks in our whole school out of 3,500 kids, right? So for the first 17 years, right, that's kind of the way we lived. Well, that's kind of the way I lived. And then, ironically, when I came home one day from school, and my father, he had never taken off work. This is something he had never done. I'll never forget, it was June of 1974. He's standing in the living room, and I walk in, and he says, "What are you going to do?" So, "What are you going to do?" He says, "You can't stay here." He says, "Listen," he says, "you want to go into service?" He says, being from the small town, I'm like, "Yeah." And he says, "Okay, tomorrow your mom's going to take you down to the recruiting station." That's kind of how the whole service journey began, But I'm going to work backwards just a little bit, and I'm going to say, my life as a young man, being in a predominantly European culture, right? It was a struggle. And then I have to say also, and the reality is that there were some things that happened growing up in the home, right? I look at it now, I looked at it years later, that reflected some trauma. But I got in the service in 74, came out in 77. And, it was, when I got out in 1977, soon after, my mother passed away in 1980. And after she passed away, I think, I basically did a downward spiral, okay? So, I became homeless. I got involved with heroin, right? I was a heroin addict for like 25 years. And, I suffered from some mental illnesses. And those are the 3 years that I basically worked in. Homelessness, mental health, and substance abuse. Now as I transitioned out of that, I was able to give some things back.
Yeah. So, it's been quite a journey, I think, just based on what you're saying and, your and my discussions over many years, right? You've kind of come back from being a substance user, being in recovery, then coming to work at Dry Hooch of America as a peer mentor, and gradually sort of working up the ranks, taking over some management roles, and now serving as executive director for the organization. That's an incredible journey of recovery. Any just reflections on sort of what that has been like for you to kind of have such a big turnaround in your life, and what that has meant in terms of what you're trying to do with your time at this point?
Well, so when we look at coming to Milwaukee, I was homeless, right? And I think that so there's so much here. I'm gonna try to unpack some of this stuff. But I spent 9 years in a penitentiary. Okay, I got involved with drugs and alcohol. We're really just drugs, and I was a heroin addict, right? And so I got into this place where nothing really mattered. And this all happened after my mother passed away, but I still hadn't dealt with the trauma of the past, right? So I really dealt with heroin as a way of bonding, because I didn't understand there were other ways that I could bond, so I bonded with heroin for a number of years, right? And understood that as I was coming out of that whole situation, that I needed to reconnect with people, in terms of bonding. And that there was a process too. Actually kind of still going through that process. But that whole transitional thing that we do is something it's still a journey. I'm 64 years old and I'm still transitioning. And, I didn't want to jump into this so fast, but I guess I'm going to have to. It had a lot to do with me coming to Milwaukee and being involved with Dry Hooch. There's a number of people like Mark Flowers. He was the first person who actually introduced me to peer support, and became a really good friend of mine, a really good personal friend of mine. And Bob Curry also. And there were a lot of mentors around at that point, even though I did not quite understand what was happening, But I'm probably getting ahead of myself a little bit. Is there anything that you need to ask me,
Well, I mean, I think this is great. It's, I think it's awesome when things unfold as a conversation. But just to stick with one thing that you said that I think is going to be easy to kind of hear, but not hear all the way. So you said that you had kind of a bond with heroin. And, I've heard you describe this before, that it sort of was almost filling an emotional void for you. And as part of the recovery process, I think you've also described sort of the need to fill that back in with people and with real enduring relationships with others. But it kind of served as in a sense, a surrogate relationship, right, that you actually had with heroin itself.
Correct. When we talk about, when we talk about using, really, and I believe this, I'll be for myself, right? I've been around a number of years in this space, that the reality is that we always say that we start off as, let's just do it because we're going to enjoy it. It'll be something nice. But beneath that, I believe that there's always some issues that you need to deal with that you're not dealing with. And I think that in my case, I used it to bond, opposed to bonding normally like with people and things of that nature. Because, pulling back the onion wasn't something that I really needed to do at that time in my life. And pulling back the onion, I'm talking about being able to kind of say it's okay to experience some things and go through some things. And in doing that, nobody's going to take you out back. You're not going to hang you, I'm 64 years old today, and I still cry a lot. Yeah, I'm a 64-year-old man, 6 foot tall, a little overweight now, but I'm still just a little boy on the inside because I'm still processing things. But it's better to process things than to go back. It's a lot better place to process this stuff than to go back. And I understand that now.
So I think one of the things that you're doing is also helping other veterans and sometimes just other people go through sort of a similar process. And I'm just kind of wondering if you can describe a little bit about what Dry Hooch is and how Dry Hooch is involved in helping veterans and really the broader community as well.
Well, Bob Curry, the president and founder of Dry Hooch, right? I believe, in fact, I know this now. His whole idea was to help veterans transitioning out of the military, right? So we use that word transition. He had transitioned out and didn't get any help and didn't, he kind of came back, and he always tells a story of how he threw his uniform in the garbage because back in the 70s, Vietnam wasn't a great place to be, and it wasn't a great war, and people really didn't acknowledge that those guys had served their country. In fact, it was kind of negative. Although I didn't serve in country, I still was there in terms of understanding that whole piece. But I think what happened was that whenever he got back, he got involved with some situations, and he began to understand through his situation that PTSD was something that he had to work with. Although when he first got back, PTSD wasn't something that was really, it was just starting to get the research. So therefore, it was called shell shock, and for years he would say, Otis, I had 10 fingers and 10 toes. There was nothing wrong with me. I did the same thing for years, so I kind of understood that. But what Dry Hooch does is that we're going to use that as an example. Guys that were in the military getting out, guys that already had already been in country, or guys who had been in the military, not necessarily in country, they kind of had a buddy to walk through them, to kind of walk with them through life. One example I always give is that imagine you're a young kid and you're going into the military and you end up in the sand somewhere in Iraq. You're 17, 18 years old. You're in combat. You're not going to come back the same person. I think that's the way he looked at it, and you're not going to know who you are when you got back, and your parents and your family are not going to necessarily know who you are either. And that's what that whole journey was about. The medical college, when I got involved with which let me just say that the medical college, when we talk about like when I got involved, when I met you, we were all doing, you guys were doing the QRF manual. Okay, the QRF manual was a written process as to how peer support was to be done. That was a partnership, between the medical college, the VA, UWM, MHA, right, and Marquette. So in that process, which was a great process, we all sat down and, the veterans were able to put together, along with the clinicians, and I will call you clinicians in this context, in the academics, to put that together. And today we actually utilize that. We've probably done over, we've probably done over 300, trained 300 people, veterans, and now we're training non-veterans with that, with that manual now.
Yeah. So just for the audience, Otis, I'm wondering if you can sort of spell out what QRF means and why that title is important.
Quick reaction force. It's kind of like present time. When they say quick reaction force, I had manual. I can remember back whenever, I don't know, maybe like 6 years ago or 7 years ago, we used to actually go out. People would call us, like police stations or hospitals or family members would call us, and we would go right to the situation. And you got to the situation, there may be a veteran still there. When I say still there, go to the situation, he wants to salute me. He's still there. Mm-hmm. He wants to salute me as if he's in, he wants to salute me, right? So the reaction was, quick reaction. We need to get there. We had to kind of phase that out because of liabilities, and that's such a thing. We had to get the EMTs to come in and start taking. Right.
But I think the idea was kind of trying to think through how to talk about peer mentorship from a veteran lens on what that means. And so I think, you went through a list of folks, with the African-American War Memorial who were, I think, important. I think, for where I sit too, just to sort of describe these partnerships, right? So we've been working with you and Dry Hooch for a number of years to sort of try to take the ideas around peer mentorship and transform that into a formalized training that really reflects veteran culture and veteran values, and also a non-clinical viewpoint in that training material. And there were a number of faculty that were involved from here, Dr. Leslie Ruffalo, Dr. Katinka Huyer, and actually these ideas even go back further to work that was initiated by Dr. Jeff Whittle, who works here and at the VA hospital. And so I think one of the things that's really interesting for me is that some of these products that you're using now to help veterans, to train peer mentors in the veteran world, that's really come through a collaborative partnership over many years, working toward that manual and trying to make sure that it's not just us talking right from a clinical lens, but it's really kind of a joint way of talking through some important ideas that maybe sometimes reside more in the clinical world, right? They're more from the clinical perspective, but we've actually tried to take that and put it in terms that come from the veterans, right? To make it, just more accessible, I think. How was that process for you of working collaboratively with us, to get to that point where the manual was created, the quick reaction force manual was made?
Yeah, so we're gonna see where I start, right? Like whenever I got right here to Wisconsin. Okay, let's run that, Ms. Zeller.
Now you got to remember, when I first came here, I was homeless. Guys just started talking about Dry Hooch. There's a place called Dry Hooch where you can go and get a cup of coffee, right? And talk to guys about different issues and whatnot. They had some programs over there, and I had actually read about it and talked about it for about 6 months. I think Bob Curry, I think originally the idea was he had some struggles coming back from combat, and the younger generation, I believe, was something that he was going to try to do something about in terms of them not transferring back by themselves. Dry Hooch is a transitional program, which at that time I didn't understand what that meant. And it was a peer support, and I didn't understand that either. And I didn't understand the concept, but I hung in there for about 6 or 7 months, and every day vets would come in, and combat vets would come in. And a lot of them suffer from PTSD, depression, bipolar, that kind of thing, as a result of combat. The guy comes in, he's suffering from whatever it is, he has some issues, right? And he's suicidal. We're not clinicians, so we were able to journey with them over to the hospital. Kind of like that go-between guy, right? And that's what happened to me, right? I always had a peer support person to support me. My journey with other veterans was real positive. It was really empowering. People always say, "Thank you for the service." I hear it every day. And that's great to hear, but a lot of times they want you to listen to what they want to say, things that, because they're still there, so if you say thank you for that, it's a great thing. But if you engage in conversation, then you're really helping. You're being a peer. That's what it doesn't take a lot of money or anything. Just stop and listen to what the guy or woman's got to say. When we talk about the most profound thing that Dry Hooch has done, and the most effective thing it's done, is they fill that gap. Hey, look here, I can walk with you back into society. It was all about one vet helping another, regardless of what the situation may be. I became director of operations a couple of years ago, and I think last year I became director of Great Lakes Dry Hooch, where we have 5 locations, right? And it's been an experience, and it's been a journey, and it's been real positive. For any more information, further information, please go to dryhooch.org.
There you go. Zeno. So let me answer your question as far as, and this is so important to me that people get really, I want the community to know this, but I also want to validate some things. You and I had a conversation, and I'm going to say it like this. I've talked to Jeff. I've talked to Leslie. I've talked to Katinka. I've talked to Syed, and I've talked to Zeno. That's the way it was approached to me. See, and for me, it was like, I didn't know that you guys were doctors. It wasn't something that was brought up, it just wasn't something brought up. And that's the approach that was taken. So when I began to learn things, like you said to me one time, "Otis," I said, "Yeah." You said, "Yeah, you're gonna learn some things." Oh no, we're here for a project. But what sticks out is that you said, we're gonna educate you too. Like, and to me, I took it like I'm in college. Now that transition, I don't know if you get this or not, but that was important. What was more important was that it never was about the project. It's always been about our relationship. Yeah, it's a public relationship. It's not a private relationship. You know, private relationships, and I'm not taking anything from it, but private relationships are relationships where you come to my house and you have to sit down and eat with me, right? Then you have your public relationships. This is the key. You go into somebody's community, you're going into their house. And if you're coming in there, and this is what you guys did really well, you came in, you know, into Dry Hooch, right? And you were able to first listen to what was going on, not so much about the project, but about the human being. And then we talked about the project. So you validated us. And that's what you've always done.
Yep,
you know,
yep.
Jeff was validating. I didn't even know Jeff, right? But I would listen to him talk. A regular guy, you know what I mean? You know, just a regular guy talking. I'd be like, yeah, who the fuck is this guy? Excuse me. But you know, but then I could understand him. I could understand him. And he got it. He got it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, what was really interesting is we probably spent about 2 years trying to put together that manual, which was about 18 months longer than what the project said it was going to take. Right? Because we were trying to really do that listening and I think really talk through some of those pieces in a way. And we ended up, I think, with a product that resonates with veterans because it is in the veteran voice. So I just, you know, I kind of wanted to kind of loop back to that quick reaction force piece that is in the questions here and sort of unpack that a little bit. I want to move forward a little bit, Otis, and think a little bit about how you and Dry Hooch were involved in the COVID-19 response. So, I mean, on a typical day, you're doing mostly stuff with U.S. military veterans, but all of a sudden COVID-19 happened. And can you just tell us a little bit about sort of what types of roles that you took on during that time?
Well, you know, so first, you know, and I cannot, and I know you want to stay centered on this thing here. I mean, as the thing goes on, but I cannot. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. Look, Zeno, you called me. You said, Otis, you have a vehicle that you can pick some masks up. See, you're validating as you go along. But yeah, I want to get to your point. So yeah, you know, I went out and we picked the masks up and we did that. And then, you know, we created this team, you know, with Native Americans, which was Wade, Cecilia, and two. We also had a guy from Kenosha. My position was to, you know, keep things organized and continue to translate information, you know, just pass information back and forth and fill the gap. You know, we were able to get literature out all over the county and whatnot, right? And you know, Ron, here we are again. I saw you making masks. So, you know, it wasn't hard for my position, you know, to just, you know, just jump in there and do it, you know, and I don't think for any of us it was hard because in that process, the medical college is constantly validating. You're not telling us, you know, even in that instance, the COVID-19 instance, it wasn't like, you need to do this, you need to do that. It was more like, can you give us a hand? You know?
Just to be clear, Otis, it wasn't, can you give us a hand? Because, you know, we're trying to validate you. We needed a truck that day.
I know. But like in my mind, it's like, can you give us a hand? Sure.
Right. And I mean, I think that's one of the important points for me with the COVID-19 response is oftentimes in community engagement, you know, it's sort of the university or the institution sort of trying to teach the community or bring the community along or whatever. But I think when there's real partnership, it's a two-way street. And in that situation, in that moment at the very beginning of COVID-19, we were really struggling here on our campus to respond effectively. You know, we were caught off guard. We didn't have enough resources in certain situations. I couldn't get a vehicle that was big enough that day to move some stuff. And I'm sitting there ticking through, who can I call? And the first name that comes to mind is Otis not only has a truck, but might be willing to help me. And I think that that's a huge kind of example of what real partnership looks like, right? It's mutual. It's a two-way street.
Yeah, it is a two-way street. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the role that you played in COVID-19, I mean, can you just talk a little bit about the amounts of food that you were moving into minority communities during that time period?
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe about 25,000 pounds, 30,000 pounds somewhere moving, because we were moving up to the Menominee tribe, right? We went to the south side, we went to the north side, right? We even did some things in the Asian community, as far as food was concerned. So I would think that we're around 30, 35,000 pounds, maybe 40,000 pounds. But that was a collaborative effort. It wasn't, and I have to say this, because, like it's really kind of humbling. There were men and women in the veteran community and in the community at large that were stacking those trucks, with food and taking it on, right? Here again, the medical college was validating the community. I can't stress enough to talk about peer support, not just on a one-on-one level, but peer support in the community. And you said it yourself. There was a give and take. Historically, it's never been like that. Historically, it's like, you walk into a doctor's office, right? He's got a small corner, she's got her small corner. You're sitting there, and it's not a give and take. It's like they're going to take. That whole relationship with the medical college is like give and take, literally giving and taking. So that's what pushes that whole thing forward.
Yep. So I think my final question for you, Otis, is you've done some amazing things over the last number of years. Your life has transitioned in some amazing ways as well. And what do you see for your future, for the future of Dry Hooch, for the future of this sort of community work?
Yeah, so, a while back, and I have to, acknowledge that I am a person who really admires education, no matter where it's coming from. So when I got here, I was homeless. Today, I'm 15 classes out of my community engagement degree. You get that community engagement. Where's all that come from? It was a, community engagement degree. That's a byproduct of the work we've done the last 10 years. So hopefully next year, this time, I'll be getting my bachelor's in that, right? And that's a great thing, And I attribute that, and I know that you guys don't want to hear, but I attribute that to that team at the medical college, a big part of it, along with my wife and my friends and all my peers around me. But it never would have happened if I hadn't been exposed.
Yeah.
I hadn't been brought in.
From our discussions, I think that education component has been on your bucket list for years, right? It's been something that you've wanted to complete. And just as a courtesy to UWM, because you're highlighting all the stuff that MCW has been doing. You're taking that degree at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Is that right? Yeah. I think that's that piece around degree completion for community partners and folks in the community is a huge one for a lot of folks that we work with. And I'm really happy to see that you're working toward that goal very steadily, Otis. And I already hear your language changing based on the classes that you're taking.
Yeah, I know. It's a little sharper. I know. That's what happens. But you had told me that a long time ago. Otis, you got to get it. You got to get it. So, yeah, I'll be getting that degree. And hopefully, I am, a lot of things are transition with Dry Hooch, as you know. And there's another generation, of post 9/11 Afghanistan, Desert Storm veterans, younger veterans than myself and Bob. And I'm right now, in the transition of trying to bring those folks in.
Yep. Yeah, I hear that, 5 by 5, as the military folks would say, right? So really trying to, pull the next generation of leaders up and get them ready. So that's a huge lift and an important lift. And I think that a really solid vision for the future is sort of what those handoffs look like. I do want to transition, Otis, to handing it back to Stacey Young, and Dr. Young can maybe facilitate some questions for you from the audience.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Franco. Thank you, Otis, for all of your comments and reflections. It was so, I think, inspiring to hear. And I wanted to, again, open the opportunity for anyone in the audience. If you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat, or if you even want to use the hand raise function in Zoom, we can utilize that too if you would rather verbalize your question. There is one question in the chat that says, how many veterans do you typically see in a week at Dry Hooch?
Well, that's a really good question, because what has happened is that what has happened in the last couple of years, as we know, COVID, we just didn't see anyway, for about a year. We did a lot of a lot of virtual stuff, but we didn't see them. So it's really narrowing down to quality of people coming in. And what I mean by that is like this week I was over at the FOB, and I think I've seen about 10, 15 vets come in there. They were drizzling in, but they were coming in for purpose. They were coming in because they needed peer support, or they needed to get over to the hospital, or they needed transportation, because we have a transportation vehicle now that covers the whole county for veterans that need to be transported for whatever reason. So I'd say about 15, maybe 20 between the two locations this past week. That's a good number, because again, if they come over there, I've got a vet right now that I'm struggling with real quick, Miss Stacey. He's back on drugs and whatnot. So now we gave him the opportunity to go over to the VA about 2 months ago. He said he could handle it. He came back. Landlord called me and said, Otis has got to go. I talked to him, tell him, look, you need to go over there and stay there 90 days. You're not going to have a place to stay. Landlord calls me at night and says he's out of the hospital and he's back in his apartment. I'm going to give him 30 days. I said, hold up for a minute. Tomorrow morning, we'll go have this conversation. And that's peer support now. You can see it. That's peer support. That's what's happening, So those are the kind of veterans we get. 15 or 20 a week right now. It's starting to boot back up again. We have a food pantry also that we service the community along with vets too, along with vets. They can come in every Friday and pick up food. The legal clinic, where every first and third Thursday, we have guys, attorneys that come in and actually do pro bono work on different cases as consultants, right? Along with your groups. We're probably booting back up now to about 10 groups a week. At one point we had 20, but coming out of COVID, we're trying to reboot again. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. And then as a follow-up question, what's the main way that veterans find out about Dry Hooch?
Yeah, that's a real good question. As of late, it's been a pretty good networking thing going on. I'll give you an example again. So I'm down at Brady. I'm down at the FOB on National Avenue the other day. A guy comes in. I'll just call him Johnny. Comes in. He says, "Yeah, I just got my bachelor's, and I'm a social worker, right? Right now, I don't know how he knows, right? But I heard that you guys might be hiring, right? So, we have this conversation and whatnot, right? So I think it's a lot of word of mouth going on. We've been around, 10, 12 years now. So there's a lot of networking going on. The key about Dry Hooch is that we're not going to wait. I don't sit in my office. I got my jeans on and I come out all day long. I'm on the streets talking to people and doing things. That's what we do. We do peer support. That title is just a title, just executive director. Somebody's got to push the paper. But I'm on the ground all the time, so it happens all the time. People are always coming and going, through social media or through just word of mouth.
Great, thanks. And I guess a question I have, certainly unless there's other questions coming in from the audience, but something I think about is, where might we still be in your perspective missing the mark, if you will, in this work? Are there, where we might be missing the mark, or how do you see, what does meaningful change look like in the next number of years that you would find the most rewarding or encouraging?
So I want to speak across the aisle in the community and also veterans. Okay, if that's okay for me to speak directly to those two things, I think it's happening. I think that my experience with MCW has been great, and I don't say that modestly. I don't say like I ain't really into stroking people, but I'm just telling you what it's been. And the reason that is because, again, validation. You know, Dr. Whittle, I'll call him Dr. Whittle, but Jeff called, he called a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago. And I think his wife was making masks. It's when masks really were needed too, right? That's what I'm talking about. I don't know if anybody can capture that at all. But he called me, Otis, my wife's making these masks, you know, what do you think, blah, blah, blah. You know, I gave my opinion, blah, blah, blah. And when you enter into the community, and you guys are doing a great job of it, you know? Somebody once said to me, I was at a meeting out there. I'm sitting in a meeting, everybody's introducing themselves, right? The person next to me says, I'm Dr. So-and-so. And I says, okay, I'm Otis, right? And I says, and they were talking to me, they were gonna come down to the farm. And I said, okay, I got the person's name and I was like, okay, so-and-so. And they stopped me. It says, no, I'm Dr. So-and-so. See, that's that type of thing. It's like, okay, that's fine, we understand, but use that in the arena that needs to be used in. You're dealing with a community that you want the community to be a part of whatever you're doing. But first, before that's going to happen, you better go into the house, and if they're cooking or whatever they're doing, I mean, I'm using it as an example, you better be engaged in that conversation first, you know, so you validate, you know, and I think that, you know, that's a different concept, a different way of looking at things. But the medical college, as I see it, is doing a great job of doing that, being able to actually connect, you know.
Excellent, thank you. And I appreciate the reflection specifically on MCW. And you know, I think about, you know, also the collective, you know, what more can and should we be doing at an institutional level, certainly, but societally as well. What are other areas where we can continue to grow and understand in this area? And I see another question here in the chat. Oh, I like this one. If you could wave your magic wand and make one thing happen for veterans and the people you serve, what would it be?
To make one thing happen. From that side, I would probably say, you know, probably for the veteran and for their families, right? See, I know that people have invested years and years of education, I'm big on education, into their skill. If there's one thing that I would like for my community and the community at large to understand is that they did that because they had a passion to do the work. They may not always come across, you know, because I'm always in the middle of clinicians over at the VA and my vets, right? They may not come across the way you want to do all the time, but give them a break. You know, they didn't go to school for 4 to 6 to 8 years and sometimes 12 years for no reason. You know, we're all human. That would be my one. That would be the thing, you know. You want to be understood, they want to be understood too, you know.
Excellent.
How you doing, Jeff?
Sorry about that. I've been kind of lurking.
Yeah.
Good. So you're not across the street right now. Yeah, you are, aren't you?
No, I'm in my office. But it's not across the street.
Okay, good. I'm in my office. It is across the street.
Okay.
But yeah, I just I appreciate everything that you do. I'm in awe of sort of the way that you were able to plan. I just remember when the face mask thing came up, that you guys have been thinking ahead about needs of the community very early on. I think that the way you've supported the things that Zeno and I have done, really that Zeno has done around mental health, have just been really important. And you know, I'm just looking forward to a lot more years of this.
Me also, Doc.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Otis, for being our guest today, for being a valued partner with us, and for everyone here in the audience for joining us for the Community Engagement Spotlight Series. It was, I think, a really outstanding conversation, and thank you, Dr. Franco, for facilitating that for us. This wraps up our time together, and I believe there is, I'm not sure if there's a slide that speaks to our next Spotlight series coming up, but there is you'll see here on the screen that if this presentation inspires you, please consider making a donation of time, goods, or money. So you can utilize the QR code there to scan in order to do that if you are so inclined. And earlier, before we began, we had yes, thank you, this slide up that highlights our next spotlight, which is Wednesday, November 17th at 4 o'clock, as we spotlight Cecilia Garcia, who is a community health worker. And so we're really excited for that presentation. So be on the lookout for registration information, and you will get a Zoom link to join us. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And we look forward to our next conversation. Be safe, be well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.